Quando il cacche mo fa seda.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking in Stations. For those of you longtime viewers that are watching and thinking, "Hey, where the hell is Matterall?" He is away on vacation for the next couple of weeks. So for today, I am filling in, and you might also be wondering what's up with the lack of people here today. Well, we managed to get the three of us together, and we're going to be talking about what's in the game now for new bros and what incentives are there to kind of come back for old players. So let's get into our panel. Joining me today, we have Spanky and Ashtarothi. Say hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Howdy.
God damn it. I gotta watch every time I introduce somebody and I say hi, Hypnagogia. He's like, hi, Hypnagogia. And I'm like, God damn it, son of a bitch. So yeah, like I said, we're talking about talking a bit about New Bros today, and more than that, the sort of incentives there are to come back and start playing the game again, or pick up the game for the first time. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk to both of you guys to talk a bit about where you started in EVE and get into a bit of how it's changed. So Astarothi, we'll start with you. So when did you start playing EVE? When did you start, and what was it like?
Yeah, I started back in about 5 years ago, I think. I don't remember the exact date. So it was right after Tyrannus. So Planetary Interaction was brand new. The nano nerfs were still kind of fresh in everybody's mind. And you also, this was right before like Incursion and Incarna.
Okay. So Spanky, for you, when did you start? What was it like?
Well, technically, I actually started playing in about 2007, 2008.
Okay.
One of my mates was around the house. He's been talking about it for ages. Got it on the computer, had a look. That was back. Thanks, Accessible Gamer. There is a lot of me. That was back in the days where you had learning skills, and I'm sitting there going, so what? I have to learn how to learn before I can go learning. That kind of... And then you hit the usual learning wall and you're just like, oh my god, there's just too much here. And I think it's like a lot of people, they come into EVE Online and the first go at it, they give up after a while, wait a while, and then try it again. It's a little bit like a homebrew. You try it a little bit too early and go, no, that's not quite right. It needs to go back. It needs to be laid down for another couple of years, and then you go back to it, and the brew's different.
Yeah, pretty much. So I'll talk a little bit about my history with it. I started actually legit playing EVE. I want to say it was 2011, late 2011. This was my third attempt at the game. I first started playing it back when it was shiny and brand new, and I was like, oh my god, a space MMO, it's gonna be so good! And I picked up the game like day 2, and I was like, what is happening? I don't even understand what is going on in this game, and quit, I think, 2-3 days later. Came back to it in 2011 after prodding from one of my friends who was like, you need to play this game, you have to. So I played. And it was better because having someone handhold you through the game then was essential. So I did that, and I started... I kind of hit the ground running and got right into an alliance and was in fleets and FCing within months. So I actually wanted to talk to you guys about why you started playing, like what drew you to the game. You said it was a friend of yours, Spanky. What was it for you, Astarothi?
Well, it was kind of a combination of two things. Well, I had kind of noticed EVE on my periphery for quite some time. I was a semi-competitive raid leader in World of Warcraft.
We have the same origin story.
Actually,
just to check, you, as a raid leader, please tell me you were a tank, because that's the only good raid leaders.
Yes, actually, as a paladin.
Good man.
But no, I had done all kinds of different roles, but yeah. So I was really big into like the numbers and crunching things and all that stuff, and towards the middle of kind of Cataclysm, I was starting to fade off. Although I think I first started picking up WoW during the Wrath. But either way, basically I I had noticed Eve a few times, but I had been turned off to it. In fact, actually, I remember going to their booth at PAX one year, and they were like celebrating whatever patch they had or whatever expansion they had, and I said, "Well, I am from I'm from World of Warcraft. Convince me to be in your game." Just like straight up went up to the dev and told him that, and he's like, "Well, we're adding this, this, and this. Go over there and check out the gameplay, and it'll be awesome." And so I go over there and I see the most boring stuff I could possibly see, because when you don't understand what you're looking at, none of it makes any sense, and that makes none of it look interesting. And so I just kind of wandered off, and so that was like my pre-experience. But then in like less than 2 months, I had two friends of mine. One was my college friend, who is really big into Eve, who wanted to check out some stuff. But then also my buddy, who is he worked at the local hobby shop. He was big into World of Darkness, and so he knew I was big into Eve Online, or not Eve Online, but World of Warcraft and high-end competitive gameplay. And I was into World of Darkness, which was acquired by CCP, and so he used that as a way of trying to lure me in. And so those two forces combined brought me into Eve.
Like some dark witchcraft.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I tell you, one of the first things that actually interested me about Eve was, obviously, Nis, you're too young. Ash, you're probably too young. I used to play Elite when that first came out, and I remember that being a groundbreaking game at the time. And somebody went, "Well, this is like Elite, just to magnitudes of order." So if you remember that game, that was... at the time, that was the EVE Online of its generation.
Gotcha. I didn't know that. I guess I am too young. I was about to get mad because you called me too young, but I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, so evidently I am. Sad.
And Ash just looks wasted. Sorry, I mean tired.
That's not nice.
I am neither. I've got my coffee right here in my Eve mug.
Awesome.
In your fancy, not Minmatar Master Race Eve mug.
See, before the show, I showed them that it shows an image, but now that it's cooled off, it's black again.
Oh, rip.
It did show Caldari, because obviously they are the master race.
Yeah.
So going a little bit into you guys and what you're doing now, just so people kind of have a little bit of an idea of your place in the game currently. So Ashrathi, if you want to tell people a little bit about a bit of your background and what you're up to these days.
Sure. So when I first joined the game, like I said, one of the dudes dragged me off into one of the two dudes that brought me in dragged me off into nullsec like right away, and it wasn't even good nullsec. It was during the time when Pravi Block didn't own Pravi, and so there's just this weird alliance that I'd never heard of before or since. That just happened to own a small clutch of Providence and then got subsequently just wiped off the map. So, I got dragged into that situation, which was very unpleasant, caused my wife to quit the game completely, caused me to quit nullsec completely, wandered around highsec for a little while, and then I got interested in the Aura app. So I'm, once again, huge theory crafter, so, actually when I first went to my first alliance, I almost got rejected because I got flagged because, quote, no new player with less than 3 weeks of, time in-game has access to their Eve API to EveMon, Eve HQ, and just every other tool that I could get because, I already had it like a year-long skill plan by 3 weeks into the game.
You nerd.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, I went, like, I read ISK the guide, like, in less than, or just read it cover to cover and plowed into it. So, any rate, Aura, at the time, if you don't know, there's a really good Eve Android app. It's not so great anymore. But at the time, it was the premier Eve app, and it was called Aura, and it managed all your characters and all that stuff. And it was written by a guy named Marcel. And so I contacted him because I write Android apps, and I kind of wanted to put my name out there and get to work more on public stuff. So I contacted him and say, "Hey, do you want any help with this?" And he's like, "No, but you can join my corp if you want." So I did. And, I actually worked with him, and we eventually decided to join Faction Warfare, and that's when we kind of really dug in and was like, well, we want to actually do stuff. We want to make a name for ourselves. And eventually I worked with them to grow the corporation to be about 200 people, holding the Southern Galente War Zone, which we have successfully held for, I think, about 3 years now. There's a period of time where we kind of all drifted off and went into hibernation, and I actually joined like a Wormhole Corp, and then I joined Test Alliance for the war and just did a bunch of other stuff. But I always kept Director Alt in Aderon. And then recently I've come back. Marcel's now been gone for a while. So I've come back and taken full command of Aderon, or at least acting command, and we are trying to make Aderon great again. So, but we do focus very much on like dealing with newer players, because Faction Warfare is a very new player friendly, or at least new to PvP friendly environment to learn about stuff. It's very, your commitment of ISK can be very, very low. You can make money while putting yourself in combat situations, which is pretty rare. You can make money in combat ships, so you can fight with the things that you make money in, which is super rare in EVE. And so we found it to be a really good place to kind of bring in newer players and teach them about the game.
I guess that's why it's also a good a thing that a lot of people do when their alliance dies, quote.
Yes, well, it is a really good place for an alliance with any kind of organization to reap the rewards very easily. Because there is some administration, there is some logistical considerations in faction to live in low-sec, do faction warfare, especially like Galente faction warfare, because you get locked out of JITA. But
I didn't know that.
Most of them, you get locked out of the enemy's high-sec areas. So I cannot go to any Amar or Caldari space without being fired at by the actual police, the NPCs.
Gotcha.
I
learned something new today.
Yeah. So, so for a larger entity that moves into faction warfare, anybody who's used to dealing with like nullsec logistics, it's pretty trivial to set up like a buyback program and just allow your people to bring in tons of money really, really quickly.
Gotcha. Well, what about for you, Spanky? What's kind of your history with
Sorry, I zoned out when he said faction warfare.
That's okay. That's the reason I quit EVE the first time, so it's fine.
No, I tried faction warfare,
Sorry.
but I've also tried low sec PvP. I'm just crap at 1v1 PvP, so I just kind of avoid it. No, when I joined up, my mate said, "Look, you got to try these EVE University people, because they will take new players and teach them the game." So I joined uni about 4 years ago, and I've never really escaped. I've got a couple of alts in other corporations. Some of who people know are mine, some of them people don't. But no, I mean, I'm kind of focused in E-Uni. I kind of think of myself at the moment as part of the furniture. Just teaching new players. Well, not necessarily new players, but players that are new to certain areas of the game.
Gotcha. That's good. I'm glad that we have people that are really kind of into like new player culture. So this is a good. It's a good panel for this topic. Good going, Matterall, from wherever the hell you are right now. Okay, so let's kind of shift our focus into talking about how things have changed. I've not been playing since Test went to Faction Warfare. I came into the game and nullsec was all I wanted to do. It was very interesting to me. I led fleets a little bit. But my whole thing was I like Rifters and I like Hurricanes. I like small, fast, blappy ships. So I stuck with a lot of that stuff. Shifting a little bit into Amar, but for the most part stayed with Minmatar. And when that kind of stopped working, that's kind of when I stopped. That's really when I stopped playing, because the other ships weren't interesting to me and whatever else. So right now, what I know about the game is just what I've read on various news websites about EVE and fan sites and other things, and then actually starting to watch the Meta Show, Talking in Stations, and all those other things. So I've come to learn that actually what I used to fly is super useful these days, and it's super exciting. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how you guys, in your own personal experience, have sort of seen a lot of changes in the game, and what you're excited about and what you're kind of not so excited about, maybe. Ashtarothi, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that probably the ship tiericide was a huge change for just kind of the way that things happened. I even wrote an article for TMC back in, I think, of Retribution that made a lot of the changes that were really key. And what you saw prior to the changes, the tiericide, was that basically there were just best ships in pretty much everything. And you could argue that, oh yeah, the Orthis sucks or whatever, but we lived in a world where there were like literally nobody would fly about 60% of the ships. They were just the correct ship to fly, and then there was other ships. And in fact, that's why the term was tiericide, because like for instance, in the old days, each of the battleships were different tiers. And so like I think it was the Megathron was just statistically better than a Dominix. And so the only reason to not or to use one over the other was if you couldn't afford the other one, which didn't make sense past a certain point. So tiericide changed all that and made it so that many, many strategies were competitive, and each ship kind of gained their own niche, which really opened up small gang, solo, just PvP in general. The other thing that changed at that same time was logistics. It was the introduction of the T1 logistics cruisers, and I think even the logistics frigates at that time. These things did well, actually, the logistics frigates just simply did not exist. The T1s didn't exist. The T2s, the cruisers, I can't remember if they were logistics, they just were bad. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But basically, it used to be that if you wanted to do logistics, you brought T2 or you didn't, right? Like, you didn't bring Logi at all. And so that change where logistics was no longer the largest ISK on the field, and you could bring it to a gang of 5 people. You could throw in, 2 Logi frigates and have some survivability, slowed down the way that a lot of fights worked, which made things much more dynamic. So I would say that change really signaled a turning point, at least in my section of space. Like, I know that some people have a lot of problems with Logi being unbreakable and blah, 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 and those are their own problems. But, for what it was, I think that it made EVE PvP much more of a fractal as opposed to, very clear delineated lines.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That sounds interesting. I came after that change sort of happened, so like I came in and all the Logi ships were options, and I liked Logi, so I was like, I'm going to train all the Logi. So that was fun for me. What about you, Spanky? What's kind of the...
First of all, I find it really interesting that a game you love and a game you're really interested in, you stopped playing because your corporation went off to do something different.
Yep.
And I would turn around and go, so your loyalty to the corporation, because obviously you don't want to join another corporation, is greater than your desire to play the game.
It's true and it's not.
You're missing loads.
It's true and it's not. I kept playing and I kept trying to play, and I actually ended up switching to and playing with goons. But I didn't really play a whole lot, and I'm not sure if that was because of what was going on with the game and everything was kind of stagnant and nothing was really interesting. Part of it was definitely that I didn't have time or the money to play, and people were like, well, why don't you just invest a little bit of time and get some ISK and Plex? And I was like, well, first of all, Plex is really expensive right now, and I don't have the time to invest in making that money. So I kind of I didn't have the time, which was really the biggest problem, so which is why I stopped playing. But the Faction Warfare, I did it for a couple of weeks, and I was like, eh. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's one of those things that always makes me laugh. Is like, I'm not in test, and they kicked me out. But you'll often hear me saying on shows where I'm talking about EVE, I'll say we when we're talking about test, and I'm like, I'm not in that alliance anymore. But In some ways, yeah. Like, I haven't found where I fit in yet outside of test. And right now, currently, thinking about getting back into Eve, it's hard because that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a place that I can fit in and actually play before I'm resubbing to the game, which is probably not how that's going to work. I'm probably going to have to resub and find that place and then go from there.
And I think that's really interesting because that's kind of the key of what we're talking about tonight is players coming back to the game and actually finding that home, that niche, like Ash was talking about with ships, finding the niche that they fit, that they can actually be part of the community. It's one of the big things that we talked about at FanFest was, CCP make the game, but the players make the community, and corporations and alliances are communities. And once you're used to a community, it's difficult to find another one you fit in.
Yeah, I was actually hoping that you guys would, when we go over like some of the other topics, of actually helping me find a place to just be like, okay, this is where I'm going to start. Let's do this. So hopefully, as we talk over the course of the night, you guys can convince me to resub and actually do something, because I've been thinking about it for a couple weeks now, and I'm like kind of itching for it, but I don't know where to start.
But to answer your Ash.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that this is actually something that I've been talking about a lot recently, because I think that one of the biggest problems that EVE has and that CCP as a company struggles with is that, what they're really good at is making things that you can invest in, right? Like, I invest in my Citadel, I invest in my character, I invest in my corporation, I invest in my SOV, right? But the problem is that those things are ephemeral, as most people who play EVE long enough can attest. Those things will burn, and so what ends up happening is when that happens, if your investment is in what you've done, and that burns, and you don't have investment in the game itself, the actual universe, then you end up having a problem. Yeah. One of the reasons why I continue to strongly advocate for the lore and for making that more accessible, it shouldn't be hard to learn about it. EVE as a universe should be interesting, and it is interesting. And so if you help people figure out that it's interesting, then people will be excited about EVE itself. And then when their Citadel burns, and then when their SOV is taken, then they go, well, guess what? That's okay, because there's so many other exciting things to try and do in EVE. But the problem is that we get this culture where we know the way that EVE should be played, which is the way that we play it in general. And so we teach this to other people, and so people think that these experiences like SOV, like being an F1 monkey, like, being, or even being a mission runner or being an incursion runner, whatever it is that you do, you decide that that's it. And so, you lose sight of other exciting and interesting things that are in the game itself. So I think that the more that we can think about it and invest in the universe, the more that we will find the game fulfilling over time.
I definitely agree with you, and I think that's something that a lot of shows that I've done with related to EVE really hit on that point a lot. People are really invested in the culture they're in, the alliance they're in, and outside forums and outside whatever else that people are doing, being on comms, just hanging out, not necessarily even playing EVE a lot of the time. So I think that that's a really good point, and I never thought of it that way, and it kind of makes me think, hey, I don't want to be just doing this one thing with this one group, and kind of want to break out of the culture and actually play the game and learn it. And hopefully I'll be able to do that next time I start playing. But Spanky, you were going to answer the previous question, so let's come back to that.
The original question, which was what changes. I mean, to be honest, I think my big thing is the stuff that Ash was talking about. It's actually making the game more playable and to give people the ability to try new things, because when everyone goes, oh, there's no point trying that because it doesn't matter what you do to that ship, it will never be as good as X, Y, or Z, then people are almost disheartened. But when you give people almost a more balanced playing field, it gives people an opportunity to go out and try new things. And as an engineer, I'm really interested in problem solving. So when you look at some of the corporations out there and some of the things that they get shipped to do, and the way they take the game and twist it and make it do things that CCP never expected it to do, that really inspires me. I think that's fantastic stuff.
That's probably one of my favorite things about Eve and people in Eve is that CCP will be like, okay, here's this thing. And then everyone's like, oh my god, you didn't think about these 8 ways we're going to break it. I'm so excited to break it. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things about people in Eve is they're just so excited to be like, what can I do with this and how can I piss everybody off?
And it's like everybody is sitting and waiting for the next Rooks and Kings thing. What are they working on that nobody's thought of yet?
Yeah, I that's actually the Rooks and Kings videos way back that they made, the big long narrative videos that they made. That's, my friend was like, you should play this game, but those videos are actually what made me go, holy shit, I need to play this game. So thanks, Rooks and Kings, for doing this to me. I have a shackle on my leg now, and it's tied to Eve, and it's all your fault.
So this goes to CCP Ghost and the new player experience, because they've been they're working on bringing the game to be more immersive early on, right? Because if you're going to consistently hook people within 2 hours, you're not going to do it by emergent player and player interaction. Not consistently. You can't guarantee that within 2 hours the person will have an experience that that would allow them to realize why they want to play Eve. So we're seeing a lot more of that kind of adoption of the story and making you become immersed in the universe and your place in it, which I think will actually be really cool. And one of the other things I've been noticing or been thinking about a lot is the daily opportunities that's come out, because even though it was hated on quite greatly when it was in development, by yours truly included, I wrote 2 big old articles and called it a tribute to bad design. But I think in a lot of ways I have to eat crow on that. I think that's the phrase.
I don't know.
Because even though I still think that it could be more interesting and more dynamic, and I think that Shadow of the Serpent is working on that. What it has done is it plays with the laws of averages, right? So if I can make the game interesting enough that somebody wants to play it for the game itself, which is, let's be frank, the biggest problem that Eve has is that the game itself isn't worth playing just to play the game for a lot of people. You need that player versus player interaction. The PvE side isn't engaging enough on a long-term basis for a lot of people. So, but if you could make that, and you can make it so that they're tied into it and wanting to play it anyways, then even if there's like, let's say a 5% chance, right? Every single day, I log in, I warp to a belt, I shoot a rat, I go home. Even if there's a 5% chance that something exciting comes from that, either it's a special rat, or I get ganked, or I find something to gank, or I stop something, or meet somebody, or happen to get the last rat and get an escalation, whatever it is, something has happened, and you don't need to win all the time. You just need to make it something that happens consistently and make it so that you win occasionally, and then make people invested enough to stay in the cycle long enough for those interesting emergent things to happen, and then let them go from there.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think CCP's big thing was there's a lot of people who get to the stage where they get bored but stay subbed and they're playing skill queue online.
Yep.
And eventually they go after 3 months. You know what? I've not actually logged in for 3 months. I'm going to unsub.
Guilty.
Yeah. And I think what they wanted is, well, there's an incentive because you're making, 20% bonus SP, give or take? Actually, that's quite a lot. So if you're getting 20% bonus SP by logging in, once you've logged in for that, then I think people go, the intention was, or the expectation is people go, you know what, while I'm here, I'll just run a mission, or I'll just do, and once you've got someone logged in, they're going to stay in, like you say, stay in and do something, and have an encounter, have an experience, and then
or
remember that it was enjoyable. Yeah, but whatever they're doing, they're getting into the game and actually taking part in the game. And once they're enjoying that and doing that, they're no longer sitting there thinking, I'm just paying for a skill cube that I'm not using, I'll unsub.
Yeah, that was what I was dealing with, which is why, again, like you're saying, I finally was like, I don't play this, I'm just going to pull the plug on it. I was actually, part of what turned me off is because, I actually have a fair few skill points, and I was at the point where I was like, I'm not too far off from sitting in a nag, and I've wanted to sit in a vertical ship forever, so I'm going to train for that. And then I saw the changes that were happening, and I was like, that's going to be useless, never mind all that noise, unsub. It was basically, well, not that I necessarily thought it was going to be useless, but that I was like, I don't understand the nature of the capital and dread changes, so I don't know how that's going to affect what I'm changing, or what I'm training, sorry, so I'm not really interested in staying subbed until I understand kind of how the cookies crumbled. But now listening to a lot of you guys talking about learning how the cookies crumble, learning how to, in a sense, and this is something we talked about last week, a lot of people are coming in and sort of, or not last week, sorry, 2 weeks ago, people are coming in and sort of having to like relearn parts of the game, relearning how fleets are going to be structured, making new doctrines and things like that, because the old doctrines in a lot of ways are not viable anymore. So part of me is kind of sad that I'm missing out on that, and I think that that's kind of an incentive for a returning player. Oh my god, everything's shaking up, things are interesting, let me resub and do something with what's changing. But that doesn't necessarily work for a new bro. A new bro looks at a game and goes, everything's changing and not all the changes are put in place yet, and they're probably not going to be there for the next little while. So what does a new bro do in that situation where everything's kind of up in the air and no one's really sure what they're 100% doing at this point?
One of the interesting things that just reminded me of something. Anyway, I would like to suggest that I think that this summer will be a change to EVE that we will refer to in the past. Like there's these big moments that we refer to. Tiericide, Nano Nerf, these different moments when we talk about how the game changed how it's played. This summer, and the command link changes is going to be one of those changes. And what's interesting is that it's going to impact everyone, but more importantly, I think it might actually be more useful for people who are newer necessarily, because not everybody's going to have links anymore because they can't have it off grid, and additionally, command links are going to be both easier to use and harder to use at the same time. So there's going to be new niches to experiment with.
Right. What are your thoughts, Spanky?
There's always going to be change in the game, but by its very nature, there has to be change, because otherwise people won't. People will just get bored, and CCP will change things because it's an improvement, and there will be some changes there that are changes potentially for changes' sake, like we talked about earlier. There's going to be no more big wars. Well, actually, there will be, but we just haven't worked out how it's going to happen yet. Right. So there's going to be lots of changes, and changes is always part of something. And you're always going to have people that are going to complain and say the changes are no good. Oh my, let's face it, when they rebalance Sweeples, there is going to be an uproar from all the Sweeple players. And you turn around and go, well, hold on, you've been going on for ages how overpowered your ship is and how awesome it is. Now you're just being dragged back to everybody else. So you're always going to get people complaining about change, but it's just, can you get them to stick around long enough to actually see that the change hasn't destroyed the fundamental core of their game?
So you think that the change will be attractive to new players, not just returning players or current players?
To be honest, I think a lot of changes don't affect a lot of people. Like you said,
yeah.
You didn't know how carriers and dreads affected your play. There are a big chunk of changes that people look at and go, I wasn't even aware that was an issue, because it doesn't affect
yeah.
my playstyle.
Yeah, looking at the cap and dread changes, reading it, people tried to explain it to me because I'd never sat in a cap or a dread. Just understanding the actual dynamic of sitting in it and being a part of it just didn't make sense to me. People just said caps and dreads are going to change and they may not be as useful. So as a person that already wasn't playing and was just training, I was like, Okay.
So, I don't want to say I told you so, but frequently during that time, like ever since October, when all of that naysaying was happening, I just said this: look, CCP knows that they have to win with the cap changes, and it only works if they're interesting afterwards. So, with everything else on the line, you have to assume that they're going to at least be exciting.
That's true.
But everybody's like, no, oh my God, they're going to make them even worse than they are now. Which, oh my, okay. Anyway, that was then. This is now. The chat is actually calling me out in the fact that command links doesn't really impact newer players, which is actually true. So I want to bring up a PSA about a change that does impact everyone, including newer players. One of the things that has happened over the years is that consistently CCP, and people will disagree with me, but I believe that consistently CCP has made the UI, especially the moment-to-moment interactions with the UI, better over time, giving you more information, giving you the correct information, and giving you the correct tools to respond to it.
Agreed.
Everything from being able to see what kind of E-War is impacting you in the center, to the new tactical overlay, to the new probe window. And yes, it's better. I'll fight you. But now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but on Singularity they have vectors.
Yes, I have been paying attention.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't, you can now see in tactical mode the orbits and the vectors of things in space. And while this doesn't sound, or while this you may not grasp exactly why this is so revolutionary, on your ship you will see not only your vector, but you will see your opponent's vector, like whoever you have selected as your target. So that way you can pilot to make sure that your vector matches your opponent's vector, which means that you're being given the tools to be able to maneuver more effectively. Combine that with the new additional information about your hit percentage, you're now giving people, including new people, the ability to fly smartly without having to understand fucking calculus or whatever it is that it takes to understand the current hit rules.
Yeah, I definitely like that. I'll go back to this, as a Rifter pilot, like I said before, which is really my main thing, even though I have all these skill points. I'm like, but my Rifter, I love it. That's interesting to me because my transversal is so important to me because I need to be fast in order to not be hit and all that other stuff, right? So it's actually, now you've introduced this interesting mechanic for me as a Rifter pilot where I have to be very careful. I have to be watching someone who's I know is targeting me and watching what I'm doing. And that's actually, I'm not a new bro, so I can't speak to it, but as a returning player, that's fascinating to me and something that I definitely want to try. I definitely want to see how that's going to interact, how it's going to affect my ability to play, and how I have to change to ensure that people can't shoot me better, basically.
The only issue I have is, fundamentally, EVE is not a flight sim.
Yeah.
EVE is a resource management game that has a graphical interface that involves pictures of ships. We are now getting, as Ash was saying, some fantastic tools that work really well for flight sim style games, but we're still not playing a game that is designed to be flown like that.
That is true.
And I think there's a disconnect between some of the tools we're getting. Don't get me wrong, I think the tools are really useful and they're going to help, but the tools they're developing potentially are not the tools that we might need. They may be useful tools, but actually they're still more flight sim tools. These are the things you would see on a flight sim, updating the HUD with all that information, showing you where your ship is going in relation to your opponent's ship, etc.
Well, hopefully we'll see more support for, not necessarily for flight sims exactly, but like looking at, a lot of the changes more recently have been very, very slow. You've seen small parts of it, and you can kind of guess what's going to happen later. So hopefully we'll get to, over time, see how they're going to integrate those two things better and make them seem to make more sense, because I get what you're saying. They don't really seem to make sense together right now. Right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, if that's what you think, then yes, that's what I was saying.
Well, I think that there has been a lot of work to make EVE flight skill more important, right? Like command SEs, and when we get to AoE links and all this stuff, they're trying to make it so that the skill and the thought that you put into the moment-to-moment flight matters a lot more than it used to.
Well, right. They're not trying to make it so that you're in a fleet, you find your person, you orbit them, and you hit F1. Because that's what the game was like when I played. But a lot of the changes
Yeah, but
have...
if I'm using a frigate with light missiles from 50k away, I don't give a toss what your vector is.
Right. No, and I agree with you that...
That's a frigate.
Right, but I mean, but it's like you were saying before, not every change is going to affect every person, but in general, CCP is moving towards less brainless F1 buttoning in the game, and I think that's again though, and I'm going to go back to that point, is that's interesting for me as a returning player. I don't know, and I mean, it might draw some new people in to say, oh, EVE is a cool game with all, it's actually hard to fly ships and you have to learn how to fly them, and that's interesting to me. But for the bulk of new bros that come in and are just trying to learn the first parts of the fundamentals of EVE, which the learning curve is already so steep for, adding these new elements seems like it makes it a little bit more difficult for new bros to find their way into it.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on there,
Okay.
because specifically the ship that I used as an example is the Command Destroyer, and that's a really good example of one of the higher skill cap ships they've introduced recently. And there's something that's worth noting about that, which is that it's got a very high SP requirement for what it is, right? Because it's not only a T2 ship, but it's also a command link ship. So you have to have actually some command skills in order to have it. So there is definitely the "are you sure" checkbox before you commit to trying to train for that thing. But what we do have is additional feedback to allow people to make the right decisions they should have already been making to begin with, right? And this doesn't even impact, it isn't just PvP. In fact, it's not even mostly PvP. This is actually mostly a PvE thing for a lot of reasons, because predominantly when you're fighting in PvE, paying attention to your vector versus your opponent's vector is really important, because you're pushing your DPS, you're trying to hit smaller things because you're usually in a battleship or something if you're ratting or whatever. And so trying to deal with being tracking disrupted if you're fighting those kinds of rats or whatever. You run into these kinds of things, and the problem is that currently in the game there is zero feedback, right? All you know is that you're not hitting, you're not doing damage, you're not being effective. But you might have guesses as to why you're not being effective, but you certainly don't have really good feedback as to what you could do to change that. And so these additional feedback allows you to get that information and make good decisions.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that Marsha typed up in chat was about some of these things we're seeing on EVE are things that either they have in Valkyrie or you'd expect to see in that type of flight sim. So there's that crossover potentially of ideas and technology between the two teams where they go, oh, actually, we could take that and stick that in EVE. That would be really good.
So, speaking of which, I'm just going to say this because I'm not going to stop saying it, Now that Dust is dead, whatever devs that are there, they need to go to the Dust office, rate it, find the code for however they manage their Dust map, and bring it to EVE. Because the Dust map is so much better than EVE's map. I don't understand it. Speaking of things being clear.
I'm guessing there'll be a dev somewhere that'll go #legacy code.
Man. Alright, either way. So, yeah, but I also think that something that you said stood out earlier, Spanky, which you were talking about, it's a resource management game. And so I kind of want to suggest to people, maybe possibly a controversial suggestion. If you're bored with EVE and the following is true, then you might want to think about this. Do you mostly fly just whatever your command tells you to fly? Does what you fly just basically mean that you follow the FC and hit F1 when he tells you to at the thing that he tells you to? And is your money making either done because you do what the corp tells you to, or you just rat or something in the way that the corp told you to? If those three are true, and you are bored, that is because you are not actually playing EVE Online. You are not an EVE Online player, you are an EVE Online resource that another EVE Online player is using.
Oh my god, it's been used! Wake up, sheeple!
So, and as much as we make fun of, like, I used to make fun of the spreadsheets in space too, but there's something about dealing with complex problems with your friends. It doesn't matter if it's high-sec in industrial stuff, trying to mining and trying to deal with that, null-sec, low-sec, wherever you are. There's something about dealing with incredibly complex problems with other people who rely on each other in order to conquer something that probably you wouldn't be able to conquer on your own, and continue to kind of assess the problems and find new solutions that makes EVE Online very unique. And I read a thing on Reddit the other day from a new bro who was saying that he understood that joining a corporation isn't about finding people that can tell you about the game. That's part of it. But it's more about the fact that being part of a system that has goals, has diplomats that negotiate with other entities, that has long-term goals, that has a history, that has pride, that is where things really come, start clicking. So to those of you who are bored and have those things be true, I challenge you to look a little bit deeper.
I completely disagree with you, Ash.
Just for the sake of it.
No, in as much as
Nice.
I agree with what you're saying, but to my mind, it's not about diplomats. It's about doing what you love in the game. If you enjoy following somebody's orders and playing F1, you know what? You're doing it right.
Oh, yeah, no.
Because a lot of people forget that they're supposed to be having fun. They pay a monthly fee
Right.
to play the game, and then they sit there going, oh, I've just been doing this and I've been told to do that. Going, have you enjoyed it? No, not really. Well, what are you doing then? You're mad if you're not enjoying
No,
it.
but that's what he's saying though. Like, I think Ashtarothi's point was, if you are bored for those reasons, you're not playing
Just
Eve the
stream
way
the
you.
past.
Oh, just for the sake of it.
For the sake
Yeah,
of it.
Oh,
and,
okay.
and I will even go to the counterpoint of that, right? So if you are playing Eve and you're like in high sec and you feel overwhelmed and you feel like the entire universe is against you and you just want to be told what to do, there are plenty of organizations that will do that too, and it's super valuable, and they will give you purpose. If you are bored in Eve and you feel paralyzed because you do not have purpose, find purpose. If your corp isn't giving you purpose, find a corp that does, because gosh, there are plenty of them that have plenty of purposes ready to go for you.
So let's talk a bit about corps with purposes or alliances with purposes. So thinking about a new player. So I'm going to ask you, postulate a few questions. If you don't have an answer, that's totally fine. So I'm a new player and I want to mostly PvP, but I don't want to really do nullsec stuff. Where's a good place for me to go?
Faction warfare. No, I mean, like I said, the nice thing about faction warfare is that it generally operates with smaller equipment and cheaper equipment, and you can make money in your fighting ships. So you can make money while looking for fights, which is kind of nice. That being said, there are still some problems. Like, you have to actually have some money in order to make money. So even in faction, and the other problem is faction warfare. Well, faction warfare has its own political nightmare, basically,
Right.
that comes from the fact that you do not control who you're friends with. Unlike a proper alliance, if somebody's misbehaving, there's nothing you can do about it. And that comes with its own challenges. So if you want to do PvP, and you don't want to do faction warfare, and you don't want to do nullsec, and you're a new player, I'm running out of ideas at that point.
No,
I
that's
just wanna do
fine.
Solo stuff.
I mean,
so-
I'm not necessarily asking just for me. This is more of ideas of what new players can do and what might be interesting to them based on.
I mean, to be
sort of-
honest, I'm obviously going to say, hey, Eve University is a great place to go, and actually it is, because we're always at war, so there are always fights to be had, and we do have lots of campuses: high sec, low sec, null sec, wormhole, mining campuses, industrial campuses. So we've got all those facilities. But there are other really good organizations out there. You know what? If you want to get into PvP, why not join RVB if you don't want to do anything else? They're still there. They're still a really good bunch. You want to do low-sec piracy, Stay Frosty, or their alliance, A Band Apart. You know, Stay Frosty are a great bunch of people. You know, as somebody saying, Spectre Fleet, if you want to do Not Purple Shoot It roams all the time. There's loads of opportunities out there.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, they're super cool. It's great because you just show up
I'm writing this
and
down.
jump in fleet and go.
Oh yeah,
There's Spectre Fleet and there's Redemption Road. Both are pretty good.
Yeah, Spectre Fleet are great. Yeah, as I say, you know, as Ash is saying, you don't join them as a member.
Right.
You just go in their channel, join the fleet, and go off and shoot stuff.
No, that sounds like a really good way, though, for someone who's like, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, and I'm not really committed to joining an alliance, but I still want to shoot stuff.
Right, sorry, just going to make a point. Marsha's talking there about recruitment timelines for eUni. This comes up all the time. Oh my god, it took me weeks to get in, blah. I think it's about 2 days now.
Okay.
And that's on a bad day. It takes ages, or it has taken ages in the past. But let's face it, we're a corporation that may have 10 or 12 people doing recruiting, and you get 60, 70, 80 applications.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does take a bit longer. But it's down to about a day, 2 days now. It really isn't a long time.
So let's talk about then, kind of quickly, some really quick and easy tips for someone who's either coming back or new to the game to kind of... So, okay, let's focus on as someone coming back. You know, I'll talk to you again about my own example where I don't really have a whole lot of time to make the money. I could pay for the subscription, but I'd rather not. So what's a quicker and easier way to make sure that I'm making ISK so that I can plex and play and not take up all my time ratting, because that's what would end up friggin' happening, is that I'd be like, I have to spend all my time ratting because I don't know how else to make money and get plex that way, and it's boring and I hate it.
What do you like doing? You know, if you trade and you have a good day's trading, you can make 500 million to $1 billion a day with a little bit of investment if you get the right trades. So you can make it trading, you can make it ratting. There's loads of ways of making money. Even if you do mission running level 4 missions, you could probably make enough to plex your account.
So how many accounts do you have?
Like characters or separate accounts?
Separate accounts.
I just have the one. I have
Okay.
separate characters.
Do you have any multi-training going on?
No, because I don't play.
Okay, so the way that you can do it, another way that you can supplement your income now, this is for people who are returning to the game. This is now a thing. If you have training slots that are not in use, you can sell them as farms by multi character training them, or whatever, slapping in some pretty nice implants to 2 different, the +5s for 2 different, whatever attributes, and then pick the skills that are perfectly mapped to those things, drop them in your skill queue, and once or twice a month, suck them out of your brain and sell them on the market. And you make back more money than it costs to do all that.
That's fantastic.
Which means that I'm not sure if 2 accounts or 2 characters will actually allow you to plex it. It'll get you pretty close to there, though.
I mean, if I can get most of the way there and only need to make up a little bit extra, I mean that's...
There are a lot
fine.
of people that have been making a lot of money with that. There is a bit of fiddling, as you have to move things around. You got to extract things and make sure your skill plans are okay. But so far as I know, it is still profitable.
Ash, you're a bad man.
Yeah, I know.
You can't turn around and say you like the lore and then come up with this idea that people have got farms of capsular bodies on the wall that they're sucking the brains out
Okay.
of.
I mean, that sounds like
Sell
good
the
lore to
face.
me. That sounds like
So-
a good dystopian novel right there.
Yeah,
so.
like
You
if
enjoy-
you understand the infomorph and how much we abuse the whole universe, somebody actually asked me the other back in when skill injectors first came out, how does Ash Sharathi feel about the skill injectors? And I was like, actually, Ash Sharathi refers to it as the second gift of the Empyreans, because the idea of being able to edit our own brain is just another gift of what it's like to be who we are. So she's all for it.
So let's then, for those of you that typically watch Docking Stations, it's usually 2 hours because we've got a Eurobro, I am exhausted, and Ashtarothi has other things that he needs to make sure he's taken care of. We're probably going to... Pardon me?
His cheese balls.
Yes, his cheese balls behind him, which 2 people have mentioned so far, by the way, just in case you're wondering. Apparently that's the bar for validation of a real hardcore raider, is a big thing of a big bucket of cheese balls.
Well, he doesn't have the beard, so he's got to go with the balls.
Mom, cheesy poofs.
So we'll probably only go for another like 10, maybe 15 minutes at most. But let's talk a little bit then about new player resources. So let's say you have a player who is new or coming back and is kind of just in a space of, I don't know what's changing, I don't really know what's going on. What are good places for them to read and look to kind of get them caught up and up to speed, or even just, I don't even know how to fit a ship, where do I start? So let's look at a little bit of some newer player resources.
Yeah, so for newer and older players, there is something that for some reason hasn't been advertised enough, which is that if you open up the help menu, which is F12? F12.
Eve?
F12, yes.
An in-Eve tool is useful?
Yes.
I don't believe you.
Yes, F12 will open up the help menu in-game, and there's a new tab called Tutorial Videos. What they've done is they've taken all of the Flight Academy videos, which explain mechanically how most of EVE works, and put them so that you can actually view them in the game client. So this will at least get you started along the lines of, like, how does this actually do anything? Now, it's really important to note that this doesn't tell you how to make good decisions or how to do it effectively. Or
no, that sounds like trial and error.
Right. It just teaches you mechanically how to do these different things.
Right.
Another really important thing to note for newer players, and again, older players that haven't really been paying attention, is there's a thing called Project Discovery. It is, if you can access it in your Neocom menu under Business. And just a quick thing about that, basically it is the Human Protein Atlas has a bunch of slides, which are human cells with the proteins dyed green. And you look at the samples and you identify where the green is within the thing, a kind of basic pattern recognition. And in real world, you are helping map the Human Protein Atlas. And in EVE, it is actually one of the better mechanisms to getting ISK for a new player who can't run level 4s, who can't do incursions, who can't set up their own PI empire. The other thing that's nice about it is that you do it while you do other things. Like if you're mining or if you're doing a mission in a ship that, AFKs or, whatever, you can be running doing Project Discovery as an additional income on top of everything else you're doing. So just a couple of really good ways to kind of bootstrap yourself into the game that didn't exist just 6 months ago.
Can I say that mind blown at the thought that things in EVE help you actually learn EVE? Because when I started, they were like, okay, here's the tutorial, now undock from the station. And I was like, where the hell is the undock button? And then you find the undock button, and the lady, the really nice lady goes, by the way, for future reference, here's the undock button. And you're like, thanks, bitch, only took me an hour. Could have told me before.
So to put things into perspective, there's an old sound file for the old EVE game where the first time you die, Aura literally laughs at you.
Oh my god.
So we've definitely come a long ways in introducing the character to concepts.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, opportunities, like the current opportunity system is completely rubbish. I started when the career agents were kind of the big thing, and I still think that the career agents are the correct way to kind of really learn the game. Which, by the way, you can also access by going to support, which is help, which is the F12 menu, and saying show career agents. Additional fun fact for those of you who, again, are not necessarily new, but this is something that older players might not know, is if you've ruined your standings or need a boost with standings with a faction, you can rerun that faction's career agents in order to get a standing boost with that faction.
That's
So if
helpful.
you need to fix a faction standings from faction warfare or whatever, otherwise faction standings is one of the hardest standings to get.
You can't rerun them, can you? But
You can rerun them
you can
every
run
3
each
months,
one.
I think.
Career agents.
I'm not under. Ooh, don't quote me on this, but if I remember
It's on
correctly,
video. It's too late. It's already there.
know.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. It's okay. It's okay.
All right. Well, either
Most
way,
people probably haven't gone through their career agent things. Let's be honest.
Well, but you got to also remember each faction, and
Right.
there's multiple career agents for each faction.
Yeah,
So I
there's
don't
three
know.
sets.
And there's other things too. I'm pretty sure the tags turn in is a one-time thing, but
Yeah.
I'm almost positive that the career agents reset after a period of time. Let me go look into that real quick.
Okay.
And I would definitely point people at the EVE University wiki because that's one of the things that CCP themselves used to use because it was better than than their one. And yes, I know that the wiki can sometimes in areas be out of date, especially after major changes.
Right.
But it's one of the things that is continually being linked in Rookie Chat because we've got access to Rookie Chat, some of the eUni management, so we're in there. Hey, you can't advertise your corporation, but we're helping people out, and it's interesting to see other people linking the relevant pages in the eUni wiki just to help people get some basic understanding of wormholes, fitting, whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've heard a lot of. I mean, EVE Uni. I think when I was playing was probably like the primary. Aside from like people telling me, "Hey, this is how it works." If I needed to know how it worked on my own, people would be like, "EVE Uni is helpful," so that's typically what I'd go do. Thinking then about ships themselves. What are some good, quick ships to get into that can be more versatile? So not just PvP, not just PvE, not just incursion, or whatever else a new bro might want to do. What are some quick and easy ships to train into that are really versatile to get a new bro started?
Frigates.
T3
Frigates
destroyers.
are brilliant.
Yeah. Frigates and T3 destroyers. I mean, the T3 destroyers do basically everything, one way or another. I mean, you can do combat probing, you can fight things. I do all of my low-sec opportunity stuff in a T3. You can insta-warp in them. They're just super freaking handy. I mean, sure, they're Fitbolts are flavor of the month, but there's a reason for it. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and like you say, even basic frigates. There's frigates for exploration, there's frigates for PvP, there's frigates for Logi. If you want to try something, there is a basic T1 frigate out there that will let you do it. Go along, it costs virtually nothing, and most major corporations will pay you back for them under their ship replacement program. Go out there, lose ships, have fun.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I find, for me, is useful, is that I will take a chunk of my ISK and I will set it to a project. And that way, if it all burns, who cares? And, it doesn't matter if I'm putting aside 2 billion ISK for some market project or, I'm going to do 50 million ISK in exploration frigates until I'm no longer afraid of running around in nullsec. Whatever it is, just make your calculated risk. And T1 frigates, as you just said, are fantastic for this. You can make a T1 frigate, throw it together with, maybe 2 million ISK, and just go out and see what happens. And sure, you're not going to compete with anyone, but you're going to figure out what it looks like to do those things, whether it's exploration, whether it's PvP, whether or not, whatever it is. And who knows, our cheapest, what's called the Asgard, because it's how you enter into our corporation, which is an Atron fit. I think it takes like 17 hours to fully train into it.
Wow.
And I've gotten 1v1 kills in it all the time because it's a pretty decent ship by itself. So, the biggest answer in EVE has always been and will always be, as soon as you identify what it is that you want to do, just start freaking doing it. And if you do it wrong, learn and do it differently next time.
Interesting enough, one of the things that I think is massively missing from the new player experience is players are scared of fitting a new ship because they really don't know
I was just going to bring that up.
what does what they should fit. I think that certainly with T1 frigates, when you buy a T1 frigate, it should come fitted. And not only should it come fitted, but there should be an information window that says to people, right, you can either fly this as a kiting ship, and you can fit X, Y, Z on it, and this is how you fly a kiting ship, or you can fly it as a brawling ship. And if you fly as a brawling ship, you want this fit here. And then at least it gives new players a fit that they can start with, rather than you getting to the stage where they're going, well, I thought if I put an armor repairer on and some shields, that would be even better. But help them out to get that first fitting, and then let them go, you know what, I'm going to take that module out and replace it with another one. Let them play, but give them a good baseline to start with.
Yeah, you gotta kind of give them the bare bones to figure out where to go next. And I mean, that was probably one of my biggest stopping blocks as a new pro was, okay, I know how to fit a frigate. I don't know how to deviate from that standard fit. I don't know how to make the frigate do what I want it to do. I don't know how to go into another ship now and fit it with anything other than what I've been taught to fit it as a frigate. Like, that would be the only thing I would know and understand. And I completely agree with you. That's one of the things that frustrates me the most as a player, is that there's a lot of extra research that I have to go and do, which I'm fine with doing, but finding the answers of how to do it is so difficult, especially outside of an alliance. If I did not have Test Alliance holding my hand of, this is what you fit, without the why, by the way, just this is what you fit. Yeah. And this is what you fly. And I missed, and it makes me kind of sad that that's not there, because much like Astarothi, from a background of World of Warcraft, of theory crafting and being like, okay, this is what you wear, this is what you modify, this is what you wear because of these reasons. These are why it's better, and this is why you have to do it this way. And that's really missing from EVE, and I don't know, within EVE itself, I know that it's missing, but are there external resources available to kind of help you understand where to fit what? And on what ships or why?
Well, there are lots of fitting guides out there, and certainly again, you know, to harp on about E-Uni, on the wiki we've got lots of different fits as well. So each ship will have 6 or 7 different fits, and a very brief description of what they're for. But you look at some of the stuff that on the market, and you go, if I was a new player, would I know that an electron blaster is better than this, or I've got these 3 things with very similar names? I don't know which. You know, they don't make it easy for new players with the amount of crap that can be fitted. Hell, just saying I've got a mid slot that's empty. What could I fit here?
Felony, I think his point not necessarily is that they're not going to fit our ships for us. He's talking necessarily about new players who have no fucking idea, trying to make it on their own, of asking CCP for a little bit of help of, hey, if you're trying to fly a kiting ship, might be what you think of fitting for yourself.
Well, to even make it easier, you could... Well, I had 2 thoughts. One, they are going to redo the fitting window, so it'd be nice if you could like go to any given slot and have it say what things could fit into that slot, and maybe even have a recommended, right? Because most ships have a gun, and maybe even better, tell you why, right? This ship has, you know, we recommend electron blasters. Why? Because it's bonus for them, and you know it leaves this much stuff, or you know whatever. The thing is that there's so much about the fitting process. Again, it goes back to that feedback thing, right? Like, you know, knowing stuff about not having a prop mod. One of the things that's very interesting is that Overwatch is a game that just recently came out, and I've been playing a ton of. And one of the things that they do is just on the side, it does little notes that let you know kind of what's going on with the comp, right? So it tells you, oh, there's not enough healers, or there's too much tank, or too many DPS guys, or too many of the same hero, or whatever.
It just sounds to me like you've been playing too much Overwatch.
No, but my point is that you could have that same sort of stuff in an EVE ship, right? Like no tank, none of your resistances are above 30% or whatever. You don't have a prop mod. You have unfilled gun slots. You know, you have unfilled slots. whatever, and then kind of expose not just give the person a new ship, but
Ideas.
help them understand the fitting process. Also, for those of you who say that they won't give people fit ships, they could just put in the career agents. They already give you ships, so they might as well give you fit ships in the career agents if they wanted to. But more importantly, B, they could actually just give you preloaded with fits in your fitting window, right? Because when you hit browse, it's just empty and you have to store your own fits. So what if CCP gave you like a generic T1 fit for every single T1 frigate in your fitting browser, just pre-made? Just, here's your T1 Kestrel fit and your T1 Tristan fit and all that stuff. And then you can use multi-buy to just suck them up and run around, run amok.
No, and I like the idea of what you're saying about having somewhere in the fitting window of saying, hey, you don't have enough resistances, one of your slots is unfilled, etc., because that gives people an idea of, okay, well, let me play with this. So I don't have enough tank, but am I doing enough damage that tank doesn't matter? Let's see what happens when I go out without tank. Now let's see what happens if I go out with not a whole lot of damage, but more tank. Okay, let's see what happens when I'm a little faster now. So then I think that's an interesting point of people actually, and you're talking about that feedback loop, people being able to actually see, I didn't have a lot of tank on this ship. I went out and died instantly. That means I need more tank. I mean, obvious conclusion, sure, but to someone who doesn't know that they don't have enough tank, how do they come to that conclusion? They don't. They sit there and go, I died, I'm bored, I'm done.
Yeah, and by the way, I also want to go back. I know that Spanky has been totally pimping Eve Uni quite a few times, but I definitely want to reinforce. If I am like, I want to do this thing with a Tengu, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to Eve Uni first. Like, seriously, that wiki, the builds, if you want to talk about, like, the decided upon builds for things, in Eve Uni is pretty locked in with about 90% of them. I still use other tools like Osmium and other such things quite frequently, but if I just need to know a good fit for X, Eve Uni.
Good man.
Does Eve really need more hand-holding? Do you actually think CCP holds anyone's hand at all? And further to that point, part of the problem with CCP and Eve is that it doesn't at all, in my opinion. When I first started, I had to have somebody holding my hand through the process to give me even a sliver of a chance of understanding what I was doing.
I think it's less hand-holding. I think it's more, by Eve's very nature, it is a difficult game. We lose, and CCP have got the stats, but it's a big chunk of people within a very short period of time,
Right.
because it's just all too much for them. And actually just giving these players enough support, like Ash was saying, to get them invested in an element of the game enough to come back and play tomorrow or the day after, that's the kind of support we need just for the first few weeks. Interesting enough, in a certain organisation that I'm a member of, that may rhyme with Eve University, we have we've got this new thing called orientation officers. So once you've joined the corporation, yes, you've got your classes. We've got 30 odd classes a month, 30 to 40 fleets a month. So there's lots of stuff always going on. But the orientation officers will get in touch after a week and go, listen, how are you doing?
That's
How are you
nice.
doing? What's causing you a problem? And actually, do you want a mentor? Because we've got a mentor program as well, where we've got one mentor, we'll have 4 or 5 mentees just to support them. Because I want to do cov ops, right? You go with a mentor that does covert ops, and we'll help you out with that. But just that little bit of hand holding, like Felony says, or support, just to get people through the initial difficult weeks till they can stand on their own 2 feet and go, you know what, I'm invested in this enough to keep going even if it is difficult.
Well, like, one of the questions that I kind of want to pose to older players who do have that, sort of bitter vet, why is CCP helping new players mentality? Because Felony is by far not the only person. That's actually a far more common mindset for people, which doesn't make sense to me personally. And here's why, and here's my question is, do you want smart long-term players or dumb drones that just push F1?
Well, it's not just that.
Job dropping.
People. Okay, so here's the problem, right? EVE Online is a very complex game,
Right.
and so what ends up happening is victory goes to the person who understands what's going on better, right? So, like for instance, when the safety mechanism happened, that was a big deal for a lot of people because they relied on the confusion that the Crime Watch system provided in order to cause people to make mistakes, right? And they capitalized upon those mistakes. And so I get this notion of like, well, you know, people need to be able to make mistakes in order for other people to be able to capitalize on it. But at the same time, I'm going to go so far as to say that, you know, if I'm going to play chess, and I'm going to play chess past playing it, you know, a couple times every year, you know, whatever. If I'm actually going to play chess and be a chess player, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm playing chess mostly against people that at least understand the rules of chess, right? I don't want to, you know, I don't want to pull an impasse and then have the person go, I didn't even know you could do that, right? Because I want to know that I am competing against a competent foe.
Well, right, now I'm not learning anything. Now I'm just learning that you're bad at chess. That's all I learned today. Like, right? That's all I learned is you don't know how to play this
Well,
game.
not even that you're bad, it's just that you don't know yet,
Right.
right? Like, I'm okay with somebody being bad because
Right.
then, you know, competing with them is part of their process of becoming better. But if you're playing with somebody and you're just like, oh, don't worry, you'll find out what that piece does. You know, you'll find out what my queen does.
When
you
I move it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that,
Maybe.
I get it. I get that people like to be able to do that, but at the same time, in order for EVE to be, I think that EVE Online is a better game when people are given every opportunity to make informed decisions.
Yeah, and I agree with, you know, people are saying, well, you know, part of the game is that you have to go into it and, you know, be determined to learn it, you know, be inquisitive about the game. And I agree. And I mean, that's part of, you know, the interesting, that's part of the thing I think that they're talking about. I mean, yes, you need to be interested in actually wanting to learn the game, but if there's nothing there, there's no resources for you to actually learn from, where is that interest generated from?
I also, I want to point out one more thing, and then probably I need to at least be winding up soon.
No, that's totally fine.
But I would like to compare it briefly to Dark Souls, because Dark Souls is another really good example of a game that basically just kind of hands you it, kicks you in the nuts, and expects you to enjoy it, right? And so in a lot of ways, the things that make EVE Online attractive is very similar to the things that make Dark Souls attractive. However, at the same time, there is all kinds of mechanisms in Dark Souls to at least let you know what impact your decisions are having, right?
Yeah.
Like when you change a stat, you can see where that stat, what that stat is going to do. It's kind of obtuse, and there's a lot of experimentation because there's a lot of things that you have to learn before you feel like you understand it. But you feel like the game helps you understand it, at least on some level. And the act of dying and the act of grinding and the act of learning, you feel like you're marching towards something, this idea of knowledge and understanding. In EVE, there's so little feedback, frequently players can feel lost as to what just happened, and then they don't feel like they are growing, they feel like they're progressing, they just feel like they're in a cage of hell, and they don't want to be there, and so then they leave. And so the question is, how can we make newer players competitive enough so that way they enjoy getting spanked enough so that way they eventually make it to being the spankers themselves?
Right, well, part of...
Isn't that right, Spanky?
Yes. Part of
Can't
playing
have
the
too much
game...
spanking.
Part of the game for me, especially, you know, as a frigate flyer, was, well, my frigate died, reship in the exact same fit with no changes because I don't understand why I died, go back out and do it again. And I mean, people are like, well, just watch your transversal, and I'm like, my who, what now? I mean, that's when I was new at the game, and I was like, I don't know what that means. But I mean, obviously now it's better when people say, you know, if you're dying a lot in a Rifter, watch your transversal, maybe you're not, you know, watch what you're doing with that. And I'm like, okay, cool, great. But up until that point, the biggest change or improvement you see in yourself is, oh, I have a new ship. Ah, hello, child. That I can't hear. I can't hear him.
That could be a good thing.
Maybe.
Hey,
Oh.
what does the goon say?
Baba choo choo.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that we have rambled on long enough. And for those of you that missed it, this was actually just a con to get these two experienced players to tell me how to get back into the game, in case you guys were wondering.
Come and join the uni and teach for us.
And teach? I don't know if I could teach.
Hey, everybody's got experience they can teach and pass on.
That's probably true. Well, that is going to be... I think that's going to be it for us. I think we're all done for the night. Yes, we're all done for the night.
Sounds good.
See me?
Okay, guys, well, I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm not sure what's going on next week. Matterall will still not be here, but someone will be here to fill in, and hopefully
What's
we'll have
that?
a larger...
Ash is doing it next week, did you say?
I don't know if Ash is doing it next week. We'll find out. So I hope you guys learned something, and I hope those of you bitter vets that quit looking to come back are invigorated to do so. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys all next week.
Aderon Robotics is recruiting.
Kokina semdol kake mofa